What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here. This is my second time recording this video. This was originally PSA's response to, they put out a formal statement regarding the Ludkins UK / PSA UK whole group submitter debacle. Recorded a video on that, had a bunch of stuff I needed to do. Hours went by. Then Ludkins UK responds, and this whole thing has basically turned into the Spider-Man meme. It is a bunch of Spider-Man standing around pointing the finger at each other. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, but this one took some wild turns in the process. If you haven't seen it, I have PSA's statement up on the screen. I'll leave this up while I talk about it. I'm not going to read the whole thing word for word. I will link to this in the description down below. After we look at this, we will look at the Ludkins UK statement. It's on Facebook. I will link to that in the description down below, in addition to leaving that up on the screen for a minute. So, to recap, news kind of filtered out. This has been going on for a while about people questioning their whole submissions process with Ludkins UK on Instagram and Twitter. This has been going on for a while and in Facebook groups. This basically reached a boiling point this week. PSA finally responds. Let's cover that one first. Effective immediately, PSA is discontinuing its relationship with Ludkins Collectibles. So they are done, out the door. We are severing ties. They are no longer an authorized dealer. Ludkins has failed to pay PSA for its services. PSA believes that Ludkins has already collected payments from its customers. That is true, based off of what I shouldn't say it's true for sure. Based off everything that I've seen in Facebook comments, everyone basically paid up front. PSA has not been paid, but PSA is grading all the cards. All the cards have been graded, are in PSA's possession. They offered to return them to Ludkins despite lack of payment. So they were going to return them for free, already graded, so that they could get returned to the customers. That was met with resistance and further demands. The first version of this video, I did some speculation on that, but we'll talk about that more in a second. The PSA's focus is now determining on a safe path to get these cards back to people. Ludkins has not shared any details with PSA on which cards belong to which customer, so PSA is basically trying to sort that out. They will also probably use a third party to send that back. And there will be a formal disposition process. So PSA will basically take ownership of these cards so they can handle it themselves in regards. And this is like an on paper thing. Basically, if you have cards with them, PSA's goal is to get them back in your hand. It might take a hot minute, but their goal is to get those back in your hands. And they state you will not be charged for them, other than potentially some shipping fees. You're not going to have to pay the grading fees over again. PSA is taking this one on the chin. There is some information here if you do have things wrapped up in this. There is a Google form that you need to go fill out. So if you are affected by this, once again, link in the description down below. Click on that, fill out the information that they want, and then they'll start piecing the list together and get these cards back to who they need to get to. But it says their number one goal is to get Ludkins not to have their customers pay again and to get the cards back in their hand. And then they go on to state that they would, looking ahead, want to make some changes to the dealer program to kind of shore these things up a little bit. Obviously, after a situation like this, that'd be something you definitely want to do. You would think after the Mark's Cards fiasco that you would already have that locked down tight. I know they did make some changes after the Mark's Cards fiasco. I believe dealers have to pay half up front when submitting cards. If anyone remembers that or knows it for sure, it's very late and I did not have time to go look for it. Let me know in the comments down below if you happen to be a PSA group submitter or know that process internally, if any changes went down after Mark's Cards situation. So that's PSA's side of the story. This came out first. Now, fast forward to my time just a couple minutes ago. Ludkins UK posts this statement, and this one is a wild ride. So this was posted over on Facebook. This is from Barney Ludkins from Ludkins UK, aka PSA UK. Lots of nonsense going on here. To the best of my knowledge, this has nothing to do with Ludkins US. Once again, to the best of my knowledge, this is all on the UK side of things. So also keep that in mind. It's very confusing because there's two separate Ludkins collectibles, a UK-based one and a US-based one. And from the way I understand it, they are separate. So all of this is just affecting Ludkins UK. This is the Ludkins UK response. Once again, I will not read this word for word. We'll just kind of touch on some of the highlights here. It's with great disappointment, PSA has decided to cease its relationship with Ludkins Collectibles, once again, UK. He basically then runs down kind of like the pandemic boom cycle here. They had Brexit to deal with, COVID-19 to deal with, insane demand to deal with, and PSA shifting from a public company to a private company, and then that's where things seemed kind of started to go haywire. They also cite the PSA shutdown as being a big problem. And then they kind of get into the details here. They talk about, in this middle section here, about after the company went private, PSA decided to upcharge all customers based on market value at time of grading. I didn't know that this ever switched. I thought it's always been that way. Maybe I could be wrong on that. This was biased and dishonest approach to increase revenue on cards that have been with the company long before 2020 surge in demand. Ludkins Collectibles fought the upcharges every step of the way. In many cases, the upcharge were reduced in favor of the customers. Once again, and I could be wrong on this, this is me speaking. To me, PSA upcharges have always been around in some shape or form. Maybe they were just more strictly enforced, but I could be wrong on that. Then he gets in the PSA shutdown. When PSA decided to stop taking in new orders, PSA told Ludkins in writing new submissions would resume shortly. This grew to several months and then to over a year before Ludkins made the difficult decision to shrink operations. PSA was aware the current model was not sustainable. Time and time again, PSA communicated they had our back and the customer's best interest at heart. PSA strung us along and decisions were made based on private direct communications from PSA. So essentially, when PSA shut down, once again, this is similar to the Mark's card situation in this regard. Same thing happened. PSA shut down. Group submitters had to stop sending orders in because PSA was shut down, which means the constant stream of orders going out and coming back and money rolling in got cut off. That's when everything kind of went sideways here. Ludkins UK, based off communication from PSA, was assuming this was going to be a short-term thing and made business decisions based off that. And then as we all know now, sitting here, the PSA shutdown ended up being a lot longer than that. Then it talks about PSA and Ludkins going into a partnership of some sort, and that was when PSA UK was formed. Solution moving forward, navigating the rough waters together and growing towards a new future. PSA provided ample intent for Ludkins Collectibles to continue operations under the safeguard of a bright future. It was a path for PSA and Ludkins to mutually provide the highest level of service possible to our customers. PSA acknowledged our distressed financial situation and agreed to the lowest private dealer rate worldwide at $16 per card in July 2020. After 3 months of waiting and negotiations, this was an interim path following continued operations at necessary capacities. 6 days later, PSA offered $18 a card special globally for all cards. This was the national special. So essentially, they said, hey, we're going to hook you up with a sweetheart deal, 16 bucks a card. And then a couple days later, they offered the national special at $18 a card, which PSA UK is basically saying, you know, what was the point of the $16 rate? If you were immediately going to go to $18 anyways, it wasn't as good of a deal. I forget what the pricing was prior to the $18. This was a gut punch this was a punch to the gut after tirelessly working on mutually agreed upon path. This suffocated our ability to operate and forced the creation of PSA UK. Basically goes into PSA UK continued to operate and hemorrhage money. We're on this line down here. to maintain minimal levels of staff, all while operating under the impression that PSA UK's full book of business was being transitioned to PSA's full ownership. So they were saying they were essentially operating under the guise of that PSA was going to basically absorb them and become an official PSA branch. That's the way I understand that anyway. He then talks about having to sell off assets in his collection to keep the company afloat. Mentions the deal with PSA UK did not include any cash payout for Ludkins collectibles. The entire company was offered to PSA in exchange for a full-time leadership role with PSA UK. He sacrificed everything Ludkins had achieved in hopes of continuing providing trusted collectible services to those of us overseas. PSA waited until there was no other option to force this outcome. Then they go into talking about turnaround times. They knew how bad things were for them since the beginning of the pandemic. They agreed upon a solution. PSA had decided to remove Ludkins collectibles from its plan after a significant good faith discussion on our behalf prior to PSA's announcement today. The full customer list was offered with line item details, so PSA may ship directly to each customer. This offer went unanswered, which is kind of the opposite of what PSA said in their statement. I come to you, the community, as Barney Ludkins. With my side of the story, I've given everything for this company. PSA strung me and many other dealers along until we had nothing and it was too late. My final request to PSA requested assistance with completing the return of outstanding customer cards. PSA declined. Once again, contradictory to what PSA's statement was. The comment section on this post is not kind to this post for the most part. There are some people that are supporting them. But generally speaking, this is just a massive game of he said, she said. Who's right? Who's wrong here? Everybody. You know, this whole thing's a mess. Both sides. It sounds like, you know, as an outsider looking in, with only looking at these two public statements, both sides are dirty in this one. You know, we don't know what PSA promised. We don't have the private communications. You know, why did they let it get this far? This, that, and the other thing. On the flip side, to me, it sounds like they kind of, you know, Ludkins UK, PSA UK, whatever you want to call it, may have overreached a little bit on the financial spending and got themselves into a little bit of trouble. Some of that stuff could have been outside their realm. You know, they probably never saw a PSA shutdown coming, things like that. But those are the things that you have to account for when you're running a business. Maybe they staffed up too much. Who knows? Whatever. But maybe some poor decisions on the business side were made that led to this. I'm sure hindsight's 20/20 on this. It's easy for me to sit here and say that. This is just all my guessing and opinions on this. I have no inside information beyond what was posted on these two posts. Regardless, it is the Spider-Man meme. It is the two companies pointing at each other and saying, not our fault, their fault. In the meantime, the people that are really affected by this are, I don't know how many customers they have, hundreds, thousands, I really don't know, that submitted cards through these people. And when I say these people, I mean both, through the group submitter and in the PSA. I'm not singling out any one here. And those cards took forever to get back to them, and now it's going to take even longer to get back to those customers. And they are the ones ultimately hurt in this. And then obviously Ludkins collectibles to some degree as well. Not to some degree, they're decimated basically. Whose fault is that? Is that PSA's fault? Is it just poor management's fault? Is it a combination of both? It's probably a combination of all things. This whole thing is a giant CF. I'd say it, but I like to try to keep these videos PG for the most part. But you get the point. This thing's a mess. Absolute mess. So, curious for your thoughts and comments down below. Which side do you come down on? I know I kind of glazed over these statements, but there was probably enough time on screen to be able to read them fully, or once again, you could go look at the full statements in the links in the description of this video. Obviously, this entire situation is extremely messy for all parties involved. Hopefully, the net result is that the customers do ultimately get their cards back. It may take a while, but I think we will head to that resolution at some point in time. As always, curious for your thoughts and comments down below. We will catch you guys and girls on the next one. Peace.